everybody. If you're watching this, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. So I just wanted to get on here, because I won't, I don't see y'all regularly now. I'm not doing Love and Marriage Huntsville and Love After Lockup. But I did want to talk about something that I noticed this week, and this week was kind of crazy. But first off, shout out to Spelman, to Morehouse, from Spelman Morehouse family. Happy homecoming. Hope y'all enjoyed it. No, I did not go down. And this actually would have been a good weekend to actually go down because I'm off with Diwali. But I didn't plan on going anyway. But nevertheless, happy homecoming. All right. So Marc Lamont Hill. Now, I don't know that it's worthy of this disclaimer, but I have had issues with Marc Lamont Hill for some time and his so-called intellectualism. But what showed up on my For You page, and I'll get to what I mean, okay, throughout this week was him arguing with some, heavy set black man in a big sweatshirt who was clearly fucking with him. And I said, I have so many thoughts because I don't follow Joe Budden. And yes, I do believe women who are talking about how he has abused them, how he's put hands on them. I know some have alleged that he's even forced them to miscarry, and I don't mess with men like that. I don't believe in supporting them. But I can't help what comes up on my TikTok For You page for whatever reason. All right, so Marc Lamont Hill, to be sure, is somebody with a PhD, even though he doesn't often tell people what his PhD is in. And by tell people, I don't mean get on TV and tell people. I mean, if you go to his website, you know that he had a PhD and finished with distinction. It doesn't say what it's in. And you can go to CUNY. It still doesn't say what it's in. He's a professor at CUNY, the City University of New York, in not archaeology. It's it's something anthropology. But his PhD, I know, is in education. That's what his PhD is in. Not an education doctorate, but a PhD in education. But whenever people are hiding like their background, there's something else that they're doing that I can already tell you is going to be on the not so up and up. Like Umar Johnson doesn't like, he always goes around and he got a side D. He doesn't have a PhD, but a side D, I mean, whatever, but it's not the same kind of degree. I just worry about people that are like that. But anyway, back to Marc Lamont Hill and this man named Flip. All right. So Marc Lamont Hill being on Joe Budden's podcast, VH1's brief short run of a late night show where he would do like this post basketball wives, post love and hip hop night show for like 30 minutes to an hour. Him actually hosting reunions of basketball wives, to me, are all part of the same pattern. Okay. And he's like that 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, I still want to act like I'm down. And that's fine if people want to like watch, ratchet reality TV. Okay. But this kind of posing as the intellectual who can also, muddle in this, I'm just kind of like, I'm always suspicious of those people for many reasons, from my experience in watching how these people manipulate their role in the media and in entertainment to make money under the appearance of kind of being a different kind of black person. I guess a different kind means like actually having an education. Anyway, so now Marc Lamont Hill probably argue that he uses these different avenues, because I've heard him say this. So I won't even say probably will argue. He uses these different avenues like the podcast to change the conversation and reach people he wouldn't otherwise reach. And to me, changing the conversation is a phrase that I am very sick of. I don't want to hear about changing the conversation. What I want is actual changes in policy and in laws that can protect people. And I feel like a lot of African Americans who get on TV always talk about changing the conversation, and all we do is talk. Now, granted, that's the difference between racism and prejudice and why black people can never be racist. Okay, because racism is power plus prejudice. All right. Now, we may make assumptions about white people, for our own safety and based off our own trauma. But white people are the ones that make laws that redline us, even though that's supposed to be illegal, but people still do it. They're the ones redistricting maps, so there will be no black Congress people representing black congressional districts like they're doing in Texas and have been doing for a long time. They make laws, all right? So I just think, and I'm sure someone's like, oh, well, what are you doing? Every day I go into a classroom and deal with children who have these, I mean, really kind of frightening ideas about African Americans and themselves when they are African American or of color. It's really alarming to me. And so my job is to educate. Okay. All right. So in theory, that sounds good, right? Yeah, I want to get in these spaces where people actually listen. And granted, there is an argument to be made that there's some people that wouldn't listen to Marc Lamont Hill if he wasn't on the likes of sorry ass Joe Budden's podcast. But anyway, in theory, that sounds good. And at various times, honestly, throughout my life, I have seen why that might be a good idea. All right. But it's the stuff that comes beneath it. However, I am also a Bible reader and believer. And I have realized the truth is just the truth. Jesus said, cast not your pearls before swine. Everybody can't be around you. Your gift cannot flourish around everybody all the time. Everybody won't appreciate what you can offer nor care, even if it is for their own good. Marc Lamont Hill, and staying in that space can eventually pull you down. Like I said, I don't even watch Joe Budden's podcast, but enough of those clips show up on my For You page where Joe Budden, when Marc Lamont Hill said, I just want everybody to be mindful that the death toll on the Gaza Strip, and we're talking about the Gaza Strip, we're not even talking about all of Palestine and what Israel's been doing. The longest ceasefire that has ever happened between Israel and Palestine, because they act like you can't say the word Palestine, has been 6 months. And it's been like 80 years. And that one I think happened in 2008. No, was it 2008 or 2009? But anyway, that's the longest time period that they have stopped actually fighting one another. Okay? So this has been a long time coming. And so he brought up the death, and Joe Budden goes, yeah, and like jumped right over it. And that kind of ignorant shit, I couldn't be around it. Because I don't think it's worth it. Because to me, it honestly said to me when I was like, doing my For You page, and this was like maybe a couple months ago, I was like, but see, that doesn't change the conversation. And then you got a bunch of ignorant people around him laughing like, as if the violence heaped upon those in Gaza could ever truly be disconnected from African Americans. They've been practicing on us for centuries. And America supports colonization and war. And we cannot negate the fact that these people are brown and that Israel colonized their land after World War II. Stop playing with me. But see, even that. So anyway, so then Gaza can become a joke because you up here trying to give serious information around a bunch of dummies who can't even write fucking hits about nonsense in the past 20 years. They can't even do that. They haven't even been able to write another hit. Are you kidding me right now? So, Joe Budden just arguing with Melissa Ford. He's always like screaming. He's emotionally unregulated. All right. He's been outright degrading and disrespectful. Melissa Ford, just little clips I've seen of women in general. He clearly cannot contain his anger or any of these punk ass, bitch ass men on this podcast. Okay. And I don't know. I guess is the podcast named after Joe Budden? Or am I just calling it Joe Budden podcast? Because he on it. But y'all know what I'm talking about. So anyway, Marc Lamont Hill got his. Marc Lamont Hill was saying something. And this dirty fucking penguin from Batman looking motherfucker decides he gonna jump in and talk over Mark and start calling him sucker this, sucker that. He's up there with his ignorant ass. His name is Flip. Okay, that already lets you know. Okay? Talking about, oh, Mark, you always somewhere trying to use tricky words. And Marc Lamont Hill he said, no, I use regular words that are tricky to you. Get him together, because you can already tell a motherfucker like that don't read. And him even taking this guy named Flip, taking this jab at Marc Lamont Hill was in the same vein as those um, black kids who tell other black kids who are in school and who are really smart and who do extremely well that they're acting white. I mean, we always hear people say, "Oh, well, they said you talk white because you talk clear." And granted, that happens to you, whatever. But I think the kid who gets teased for being smart and they try to punish them for being smart. I mean, talk about the level of oppression and self-hatred that starts from the time you're a kid to actually think that's something to do. That's what it was giving when he was like, you try to use all these words or whatever to try to make him seem stupid when he's really the smart one in the room, the smartest one in the room. But you want to one up him by acting like just a fucking hood. So anyway, and he just kept calling him a sucker, a sucker, a sucker, a sucker. And I was just like, well, fuck him. And say he does a lot of this stuff behind the scenes. To me, which is already a joke, because you talking about Flip, how Marc Lamont Hill does all this stuff behind the scenes. I just said to myself, first of all, y'all's whole podcast setup in that basement looks like we are always watching the behind the scenes, if anything. Like it looks like a behind the scenes thing. Y'all are the behind the scenes. Anyway, but the sucker shit that took Marc Lamont Hill took it like he was calling him a pussy. All right. We can problematize how men feel about that or whatever, but he was basically saying he was a punk. Now, me, calling me a sucker once, Now, did I interpret it like that? No. Okay. But I've learned, depending on the region of the country or the city or where you are, things land different. And I learned that from watching Basketball Wives LA when Malaysia beat the half black, half Mexican girl's ass. What was her name? Laura Goban. And for calling her a hood rat. And honestly, I thought a hood rat was somebody who acted like the Cardi B's of the world, like who's a good example? The Sexy Reds of the world, the kind of ghetto acting. I didn't know. She said that was a girl that sleeps with a bunch of guys who are usually in the same friend group. And she whooped her ass over that. And granted, the way Laura Goban was saying that, she was talking down about her anyway. But I was like, oh, that's not my definition of her rap, but okay. Anyway, but Flip seems like the kind who did that and wanted to get a reaction from Mark like that, and probably has been doing this. First of all, when you said he does a lot of stuff behind the scenes and never gave one fucking example of anything that he's done, that's some punk ass shit if you knew it because you was too scared to say it. And I don't think it's true. I just think you wanted to talk it up to piss him off. And you got it. And you got that reaction. And honestly, you deserved it. But it didn't work out the way you wanted it to. I think he's the kind that gets off on trying to belittle and shame and make people like Marc Lamont Hill look bad by having these moments where he loses his temper. And honestly should have. You should take up for yourself. So he can hopefully, Flip is the kind that really wants him to lose his temper, so he can hopefully make him look bad to the viewers who actually do like him. And even if they don't like him, they respect him because he doesn't behave the way they do. But also wants to put the things that like Marc Lamont Hill has earned on his own, things like notoriety, his professorship, and his businesses like his bookstore in Philadelphia and stuff in jeopardy. Okay, like he's the kind that wants him to get mad and then lose it and then be like, yes, and then it still won't be enough because those kind of insecure motherfuckers do that shit. When Marc Lamont Hill has tried to explain to them the misogyny that they hold and why their views of women are deeply problematic and why men should not behave such and such way, they start to feel it and they resent that he's not going along with their silent narc abusive code that they all agree by continuing to talk that stuff, right? And use to justify their violent behavior against women and in other ways. They feel exposed, okay? Because men like that are small anyway, in more ways than one. All right, so now I'm explaining to you why I have a beef with Marc Lamont Hill anyway. Because him being in all these different venues, like trying to be a professor and claiming his intellectuals, I know he got fired from CNN and stuff, and I'll touch on that in a second. But, he worked at a lot of different, he had a job at UPenn, he had a job at Columbia. I think he had one at 10. He worked at Morehouse for a few years, and they made him like some big endowed professor, but he left when that president left who put him in that position. But even then, I felt like his goal was to be in these spaces, and I even felt like he went down to Atlanta and really tried to get that job at Morehouse. One, because he wanted people to not question him the way they have the likes of Michael Eric Dyson and Cornel West, Mr. Harris Perry. People ask, well, why don't you teach at a black college? Because as much money as they've made at this point, if you really care about the people, go to where the people are. Um, and so I think that's why he did that, to kind of cover his bases. I also think he was willing to take that job in Atlanta because that's where CNN is based. Yeah. Okay, check. And I think he thought he could have a very nice setup there, and probably would have until he got fired. Anyway, so people like Marc Lamont Hill I have a beef with, like I said, like the Michael Eric Dysons, Melissa Harris Perry's, people who have these professorships but also had these like news shows. And Melissa Harris Perry got fired as soon as they told Donald Trump, as soon as Donald Trump held his right hand with the Supreme Court justice and said, "So help me God," out after saying, "I'll uphold the Constitution." MSNBC said fired, the same way they fired Joy Reid. They have a history of pulling black women off the air. That's like their quote unquote liberal bullshit. But my issue with these people is that they've used their education, and a PhD is the highest level of education anybody can get in this country or around the world. Okay, they have not moved the goalpost across the world. Okay, um, and they use their education, like they get the credentials, but they do it so they can move into celebrity circles and make entertainment money. And I know for a lot of people that seems like a long shot, but I also, going from Spelman and then going to a place like UCLA where black people have no black conscience. It's like they just pull people. I was like a fish out of water because even growing up in those like racist white school districts, um, I always had an understanding of myself. Like behaving like I didn't like myself was never on the menu. But these people really believe that. And I remember this girl, she was so fucking dumb, but that's why people like that will make it. And she was a black girl. And she tried to befriend me. And for a while, didn't mind. But I was like, she is such a fucking idiot. But I remember she was sitting on a panel saying to these students, undergrads in like African American studies or whatever. And she was like, every black person should be aiming to be a public intellectual. And I was like, first of all, to get paid checks to say the same things over and over again, these people actually do get on TV and say something controversial on purpose. And the reason why they say things that are controversial is because if you can say something controversial, you'll get invited back on that network, other networks to defend it, or so people can challenge you. And at the end of the day, you don't care how it looks on CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News because you're still getting paid. Marc Lamont Hill worked at Fox News and got fired. To me, that was just a waste of time. I don't even understand. The check must have been good. By no means am I saying that these people don't have the right to live the benefits of their money and work, but I am saying that it's subtle and sinister. And I do think Marc Lamont Hill is one of those people who is sitting on Joe Budden's podcast with a bunch of good for nothings that he knows are good for nothings, but maybe, just maybe, despite his education, may not be too far from them in the way he keeps always crawling back into these circles, and quite frankly, in a way that I just don't find admirable. So Native Land Podcast, another podcast I don't listen to, but I happen to run into. I knew about it when it first came out. But I do know of the people that are on it. Tiffany Cross, she's a black lawyer who had a show on NBC and wouldn't kiss their white asses because she was calling out Democrats and Republicans into account for her commentary. It was not just worship the Democrats and this, that, and the other. And Joe Scarborough, who is the head anchor for that Morning Joe show on MSNBC, who felt like she was supposed to just agree with him on everything because he was the liberal white man, and she challenged him on TV. And behind the scenes, that he hated her for that, and they fired her. She's on that podcast. Angela Rye, who is very pretty, who also left her job, who was the former executive director and general counsel for the Congressional Black Caucus. In case you were wondering, that's a hell of a position to hold in your 30s. which means Angela Rye had that position regardless of who was elected or not. You could lose your seat as a black congressman. If the Congressional Black Caucus was still there, she was still in that role. And she decided just to be a political commentator full time on CNN and things like that. Very smart. You could tell she was very steady. But, then she starts dating Common and being seen out. And I'm just kind of like, entertainment is fleeting. It's not consistent money. And I'm just like, And then Andrew Gillum, who y'all remember, he was the former mayor of Tallahassee, and he was the Democratic gubernatorial nominee and candidate for Florida. Gubernatorials for governor. Okay, just in case. And before he had a scandal, right after that, he had a scandal after he lost with getting sick and exposed to being in a room, laying face down with a man. They did not find drugs in his body. They didn't. They did say he was going through a depression, but I think it was kind of salacious because one, he was married. He was down there for a wedding. His wife is at a totally, I think maybe in the same hotel, but wasn't there. But anyway, those three, they bring him back in, I guess, to give him a job and a space. Fine, whatever. So they apparently did one of their episodes this week talking about Marc Lamont Hill because he's their peer, okay? Not just in age range, but in the kind of black educated activist thing kind of job. So they talked about basically the dumbing down of America and how Marc Lamont Hill, here he is on this podcast with these kind of, people who are always dismissing him, and he's fighting with them, trying to, in my mind, trying to prove he's down. And Tiffany Cross was like, look, I just want to start talking to y'all, and y'all can have a different perspective from me. She was like, but I'm the kind of person, I'll tell you, I don't respect everybody's opinion. And as far as I'm concerned, Tiffany Cross, I'm like that too. I don't respect everybody's opinion just because you have one. If it's uninformed, it does not count to me. And I don't respect it. Okay? I don't. So she said Marc Lamont Hill is just, only in this position where he's sitting on Joe Budden's podcast because he got fired from CNN and because people basically turned their backs on him. And that's why he has to be on this podcast. First of all, Tiffany Cross, no, it's not. No, it's not. And I don't know who this everybody that turned their backs on him is. It's clearly not the community. Okay, because we damn sure don't own CNN. Okay, Marc Lamont Hill said that stuff about Palestine. I'm sure he knew he could get fired. Yes, it was racist. Yes, it was absolutely wrong. But my thing is, yes, he got fired for standing up for Palestine, which is something I personally believe you should be proud of. But he was engaging with that basketball wives hosting, that Breakfast Club talking-ish stuff, those Love and Hip Hop spaces before he was fired and while he was on CNN. I love how none of that ever conflicted with CNN's goals for him. And that's the way he got used to receiving big checks. So to say he's in this position where he's somehow dependent on Joe Budden's podcast for what? For what? This man has an endowed professorship right now at CUNY after switching jobs multiple times. This man has gotten big checks. You do not get cheap checks from commentating. So when Scamming asked Wendy Osefo was like, I like what I'm doing now, commentating. Once again, somebody who used this very elite title that she acquired in, writing some bullshit dissertation. Hers was like, she was like, it was like 100 pages or something. I was like, mine's like 260 pages. What are you talking about? Anyway, but because there's big money in those checks, right? And then you get to act like you're the expert in these sort of things. So he's not, let's not act like this is somebody standing up against 9/11 Richard Gere and then losing his opportunities in Hollywood for saying that this war in Iraq was wrong. Let's not act like this is Paul Robeson, who is challenging this whole idea that the Soviet Union is our enemy, when in fact, back in the 1950s and early 1960s, and he loses his jobs and goes from making $100,000 a year to $3,000 a year because he said that Black people have an enemy in the U.S. government. Why are we hopping? Why would we hop on board immediately to, down the Soviet Union and what they're trying to do with communism? Because there's at least another way to live. This is not that. This is not that, and that's the problem with this, because we know when people get racist fired, like Marc Lamont Hill did. Yes, white people's racism is that deep, but it's surface level in the sense that we're trying to. Then people like this try to intellectualize it and act like he has to do this for a living. Yes, maybe to maintain a certain kind of lifestyle, but this is not somebody living hand to mouth. And in this current economy, that's tough for everybody. Miss me with the BS. So Marc Lamont Hill, and I'm gonna tell you how I know this is part of my, like, he's also still full of shit, but he got that man together and he was right about that. Let me be clear. He told the story. This was that time on Breakfast Club, about how he was homeless after he left Morehouse because he decided he didn't want to play basketball anymore and lost his scholarship. First of all, that was news to me anyway. I was like, a scholarship to Morehouse for basketball. First of all, Morehouse's basketball team, and it didn't just get this way, is a joke. So if you got it, nobody really expects you to win. And if that was part of the setup, then by all means, okay, you should have just showed up to them damn games. Okay, but says he was homeless, which honestly, yeah, maybe he wasn't in the dorm after that, I guess after losing his money. But I think that story just made me go, and it may have been kind of true. Like he may have had to, he said he slept in the train station tomorrow. I was like, oh yeah, that is rough. But it struck me the way it does when Steve Harvey says he was homeless, because he was traveling a lot to comedy shows and was at home on a regular basis. But his ex-wife, who said that never happened, okay, Cat Williams, and the people who were on the road with him that were like, that's bullshit. People do that to make their story seem bigger than it is. Then he manages to re-enroll in college at Temple. I think only maybe missing a semester and then being able to catch up. This just doesn't seem like, and granted, resilient, sure. I feel like he was putting 20 on 10. He goes back to Temple, back in Philly, where he's from. And I remember this. This was back when, I actually listened to the Breakfast Club like 10 years ago. And I remember Angela Yee saying, was there a reason you didn't go home if you were homeless? Could you not go back? And she wasn't saying it judgmentally, although Charlamagne chimed in. He was like, everybody says they were homeless. And Mark Hill was like, but they be lying. I'm like, you are too. And he said, well, maybe I could have gone home, but I was just ashamed. And I was like, that's a little different than having nowhere to go and maybe spending a night in a train station because you couldn't get in touch with your friends because it's before text messages or something. I'm just not buying it. It just seems part of the performance. And that's a little different than being able to re-enroll in college, still finish within like a reasonable amount of time, go to grad school, finish your PhD in education, still very young, work under Michael Eric Dyson. And then you got into a program at UPenn working under Michael Eric Dyson, whose PhD and his professorship don't match either, but they get so much attention on TV that they give them these jobs. And the reason why they pick Black people who don't take themselves that seriously is because it will ultimately undermine the presence of the smartest Black people in those spaces. Now, they're on TV, they make money. They're the ones you should listen to. So then the real Black professors who often make sacrifices by teaching at HBCUs and could make more money but really care about their community in a different way, or who are working really hard to actually do research and to preserve the history of Black people, even at these predominant white institutions, Ivy League, they're not the ones that get the attention or support. Because in their minds, well, they're not on TV like that, so they can't know as much. That's the thinking, and that's why I resent what he's doing. And even then, he admits that he was in graduate school asking Michael Eric Dyson about how he could get into the kind of work that he was doing on TV, this, that, and the other. Michael Eric Dyson is not smart, okay? And he talks to Black people like we're stupid. And he had said things when debating with other Black people on shows like Democracy Now!, saying he wishes Black people were able to understand all these complicated terms. But right now, it just needs to be about voting for Hillary Clinton versus this. Like, this was like in 2016, and he's fighting with Eddie Glaude, both of them fighting for checks because don't neither one of them really give a damn about the community. Um, and he talks down to black people, or like I was doing my For You page with, scamming ass Jamal Bryant and Michael A. Dyson is talking, and Michael A. Dyson was like, most gospel music is whack. This is the same man claiming he's an ordained preacher and a hip hop head who's in his mid to late 60s, trying to use the slang of a 25-year-old. It's one thing to enjoy a music genre, but his behavior is wild. And don't think we forgot, or I forgot, about you sexually harassing black students. And those were just the ones at school. Yes, I know about others. Those circles are small in DC where you were working at Georgetown. Anyway, so I say this to say these people move weird. So you have the Marc Lamont Hill, Melissa Harris Perry, who I know somebody who worked under her and was like, she's really hard to work for, which I believe. Now, granted, my attitude toward that is basically like, well, all the white men are also very hard to work for, but they don't seem to get scrutinized that way, for having emotions or whatever. But if you asking people to work on Christmas because you decided you wanted to, and then getting upset with them as employees that they have to leave their job working for you, it's a no for me. I can't take you seriously when you talk about unionizing and the rights people should have. Okay? Ebony K. Williams, right? Oh, she's a lawyer. She has this background. She did law for a few years and then wanted to be on TV, commentating, and then did the Real Housewives of New York. Now, I'm not sitting up here saying that the stuff that probably happened to her was not racist and all this other stuff. I'm not saying that. And see, that's the thing about muddying the waters. What I am saying is that these people want to be on TV and in celebrity circles. And Ebony K. Williams gets on my nerves for many reasons. Like, she got that Joker mouth. She has that line that, I know that's petty, but oh well. And then you get these people, and I even know people that I went to college with, who got these medical doctorates and now just want to be a public health advocate and want to go around making speeches because you get a lot of money on those speaker circuits. The problem is it's not consistent, but you also get paid a lot and you don't have to keep up with the day-to-day of a job. Now, if we're going to talk about the importance of Black maternal health care, especially with people I went to college with, at Spelman College of all places, where you are constantly, as you are at most HBCUs, taught to think about using your education, not just for you so you can get a nice big house, but also how you can help your community. And we're talking about Black women dying in childbirth shortly thereafter, and one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world are African American women. Don't you think a lot of your work would be better used by you actually remaining, not necessarily even in the hospital, but at least having your own practice and helping Black women with their health care? I personally think so, right? But these people want a certain kind of lifestyle and have had it and have been in Jack and Jill and all this other stuff. And to me, that's a waste. And I resent people not using their education for the greater good of the community. And we can say white people don't do that. These other groups they don't have to. The threshold is different. We are the descendants of slaves in a country that is rich and wealthy, and the gap between the poor and the rich is getting bigger every single day. And whenever that gap is big, and that's just across racial lines, it's always even worse for us. So no, I don't think it's the same kind of threshold. We actually do need to do that kind of work for ourselves and to help one another. And I know people got to do what they got to do to make a living, but I'm talking about people who have actually been in these positions, have come from money or more money where their parents can kind of fund their dreams, which is great, but then you use it so you can just be known. Right? It's something about that addiction to attention that is just disgusting to me. So I say that all of this to say it's a hustle. A lot of times when you see these Black people on TV that seem to be so enlightened, I mean, think about how much of a pick-me Iyanla is. And she was on there giving people advice, and her self-esteem was all tore up. And I remember my friend telling me all about this stuff and how it had been documented because she is a social worker who has worked for years. I mean, it got her training in the west side of Chicago. If you know, you know. West side of Chicago is no joke. And then worked on Skid Row and, stuff like that. But what I'm saying is that we think these people, because they're credentialed, that they're educated. And I have seen people get through the ranks for just being certain things, like just being white and taking 10 years to your degree. Like that black girl I told you about UCLA took a fucking 10 years to finish her PhD. Now, does that happen? Sure. It does happen when women have babies, when men are still working and women are still working to get to, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about somebody who was constantly bragging about how she was in Jack and Jill, who said to me when I was in my third year of my PhD program, and she was like, yeah, I was talking to other graduate students who were like, they were just scared to graduate because of the job market. And I get it, professorships don't come like they used to in the 90s and before. And she was like, I just figured I'd stay in school and wait the economy out. And I was like, really? I said, well, I can't afford to do that. I'm here to get my education and figure it out. I said, I'm just gonna have to take, the kind of job that I think will be necessary. And she was like, literally, she was on the other end of the phone. She goes, I have to go. But this is something that she chose. She wanted to be able to exploit. And that's why I'm just saying this is kind of like a PSA. We have to be smarter and more discerning when admiring these people that they put in front of us. And it does tend to be a suspicion with Black people when anybody gets too famous and we start calling them a plant or this, that, and the other. And that's not always the case. Yeah, Michael Jackson, Beyonce were big because they worked their fucking asses off to get there. Because her parents invested. Taylor Swift is not talented. Her father bought the first 50,000 records to make it look like her stuff was selling and she was good. That was just a business plan. Okay, it has nothing, she just wanted to do this. Okay, so all of these things, and the kids who went to school with her was saying, like, when they tried to be her friend as a kid, she would always say, get away from me, I want to be famous. She was a little breath in. She just do meet and greets and all this shit. But anyway, I say that to say, I understand the suspicion, but the suspicion is never where it really should be. Right? Like, people don't go in on Barack Obama because of his policies. Like, when I go in, it's because of stuff he actually has done. It's either they defend him still, or it's because they were jealous that he had made it to a certain position. And a lot of Black men were like that. Cornel West, like it's muddying the waters again. But anyway, these are my thoughts. And I think we just have to be careful in admiring these people because, kids, will look up to them, or teenagers. I won't even say teenagers, people in college, see these people on TV and think that's the way to go. And granted, for some, it may be, but they look to them really because they're famous and in lights. All of these people teach at predominantly white schools. And granted, the majority of schools in this country are predominantly white. So I'm not, trying to play that game. But the Black students who go there and apply for college there often go there looking for them in their mentorship, not realizing that those people don't teach often at all and don't have to. That's in their contracts. They spend their time on the media circuit, might teach a class maybe once a year, maybe once every couple of years, and advise graduate students. But graduate students are like a much smaller section. So sometimes I say sometimes this shit happens, and the likes of Marc Lamont Hill getting into it with that sorry fucking nasty looking, like one of them people that take up 3 seats on the train, though they haven't put on deodorant and shit just to make other people uncomfortable and miserable kind of man flip, is a result of him looking for credibility from the lowest element of our communities. And because there is something Black men in particular think that they get by pandering to that element, some kind of credibility that they all want. They all do that. That's what Michael Eric Dyson thinks about talking like this and that dumb shit. Like, there's something wrong with that. And we have to call it out. And so these are my thoughts. I'll talk to y'all soon enough. And I'll see y'all later.